Welcome to episode 23 of the Free Spirit Academy podcast with writer, filmmaker, and choreographer Jocelyn Edelstein. Free Spirit Academy is about you being fully you. My name is Randy Moss, and I'm an eating psychology coach and Kundalini yoga teacher, bringing you conversations about freedom from rigid diets, painful body image, and never-ending cycles of self-help and self-improvement. This is about honoring our own bodies and our purest self-expression. Welcome to the podcast. And welcome back. I have to say up front that one of my favorite things about this podcast is it's kind of my sneaky, maybe not so sneaky way of making friends with people that I'm internet obsessed with. And Jocelyn's been one of those people. And in our conversation, you'll hear why I've followed her so avidly. And the moment that she opens her mouth in this conversation, I remember hearing in her voice how grounded she sounded. And I had this instant super fast freak out about how I better sit up straight and breathe deeper, or my voice in comparison is going to sound all pinchy and anxious and blah, blah, all this stuff. And this sort of thing moves through me really quickly now. And the voice that compares me and tells me how I'm not as cool or not as good or not as whatever, it's not actually ever gone anywhere, but I've learned not to hold on to what it says as truth. So it's quieter. And it's really, as I listen to it, not believe it, not buy into its stories, but as I hear it, I learn more about myself as I sort of soften and open. As you'll hear in our talk today, I don't believe in shutting this voice down, and Jocelyn agrees. We talked about these parts of us that people call the inner critic voice, or maybe the voice of the ego, and we agreed that these aren't parts of us that need eliminating or tamping down. We just need to understand them. In addition, we talk about how to listen to the body and relax into the trial and error process of understanding our intuition and what alignment feels like. We talk about embodiment and how it manifests differently in different cultures and the different wounds that cultures carry and are healing. And you'll hear about the creation of Jocelyn's documentary, Believe the Beat, that follows a group of young dancers in Brazil and how she grew throughout the many-year journey of traveling between countries to create it. And do hold out for the end when I ask her to read a poem, my favorite poem that I've read of hers that brought me to tears the first time I read it and multiple times afterwards. And actually, now that I think about it, I don't know if you have this. I'm not an easy crier. I wish I was. And I notice that as I find it safer and safer to feel what's happening in my body, I'm able to cry more easily. But because I haven't been, I have this list of songs that I will listen to if I really need to feel something and it feels like it's just stuck. And so I have a list of songs to cry to. I think I might need a list of poems, and currently this is the only one on it. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jocelyn Edelstein. What you do is really so mysterious to me. And first of all, I grew up in a religion that forbade dancing of any sort. So when I see dancers, I'm in complete awe, and it often brings me to tears. It does something to my body. And especially too, I've spent so long learning to be comfortable in my body at all. And so that sort of vulnerability and disinhibition I think disinhibition is a word. It takes dance in any way. It just awes me so much. I feel like I'm going to come to tears right now. It really does. And that, and your writing. I'm not a poetry person generally. I usually feel like I just don't get it. But when I read your writing, it's again, something comes alive in me and I'm melting and nodding and I'm just yeah. And you turn experiences that I grapple with words for into art. And so what I'm wondering first off is, were you always able to easily express yourself like this? Were you always comfortable in your body? Were you always able to express and then put it out there in the world? Or has it been a journey of getting to here?
That's a good question. It's interesting to think about that in the context of dance and writing, because I would consider those both to be on opposite ends of the spectrum for me in terms of comfort. So when I was younger, I definitely always enjoyed dancing and moving my body, but for whatever reason, that it didn't really have a lot to do with anything I can pinpoint in my upbringing, because my parents were both pretty lively, celebratory people. I had like a lot of shame and discomfort surrounding my body. It was just this like thing that I always remember feeling inherently. So even when I took ballet when I was a kid, that was kind of my first introduction to dance. And even with kind of like the like, you know, clean, rigid rules of ballet, I still struggled a lot with just my own body image and my own like capacity to relax into myself and to like feel free in the way that I was naturally inclined to express myself physically, which actually, if I had followed that at the time, I would have taken styles outside of ballet when I was younger, because that's eventually what I discovered that I enjoyed more. But on the flip side, I have a really distinct memory of always really enjoying to write. Like I would just, you know, kind of like, I was a pretty introverted kid in a lot of ways. And I would sort of hole up and like read books and then like write stories. And I always had kind of stories in my head. But there was this particular moment when I was maybe like 8 or 9. And I remember sitting with like a yellow notepad and a pen, and I was feeling really emotional about something in the way that you do as a kid. And I remember just really struggling with kind of the width of emotions when I was a child. And then I just started to like write a poem about it. And I didn't really have a strong internal judge going at that moment, you know, telling me whether it was good or bad. But I just remember it was this really big threshold moment for me where I had the realization when I was done writing that I felt so much better. And then it just dawned on me. It was like, oh, this is a tool. Like, oh, expression is a tool. And it's like actually helps me alchemize and move energy in my body. And it's interesting that really made sense to me with writing from a very young age. And even though I understood that is what dance is for too, it took me a lot longer to be able to do that with dance and for myself.
It's really interesting that you talk about like your earliest period of dancing and your earliest period of writing. You didn't have the body image shame as intensely, or did you say that? Did you have the body image stuff early on?
I did definitely.
That's why the dance was maybe a little bit more not quite as with as much ease as the writing, because
definitely, yeah,
judge.
yeah.
Did the judgment voice come out eventually with your writing, or has that always just been something you could do?
It's kind of been, you know, both and. Like I go through phases. The judge voice is always there a little bit, but for whatever reason, writing has always felt like a safer space for me, and like a more easeful space where I don't feel as self-critical, and I understand it inherently as like a form of expression that's kind of coming from this deep unconscious beautiful part of me. And with dance, I understand that intellectually, but it's been a lot harder for me to like, you know, embody that and relax into it, because the judge is a lot louder and tends to just manifest for me more in my physical body than maybe in my mental body.
And that is so interesting to think about the judgmental voice being louder in this one area. And I always think the judgmental voice is trying to keep us safe. Like it's not this, it has such a, it really gets me when people get on about the inner critic and they demonize it and they're like, you know, shut down your inner critic. And I'm like, oh no, baby, no. It's so hard on yourself. Like this is a voice that's trying to keep you safe. So obviously
exactly,
there were reasons why dance didn't feel as safe to you where writing did.
Yeah, I loved I remember reading something that you wrote about that. I think I reached out to you about it at the time, but that was really impactful for me to hear you talk about not demonizing the judge or the critic, because like you said, it's not about, my dad always says this phrase that I love, that it's about inclusion, not amputation. And so anytime we're trying to amputate a part of ourselves, you know, that's not ultimately how we become whole, right? It's about inclusion, including those voices that we think are very challenging.
Yes, absolutely. Which flies in the face for a lot of people, I think, of positive thinking. There's a lot of ideas of like, we need to think positive. We need to get rid of any negative thoughts. We need to sort of hack away part of ourself that isn't serving us or whatever. And that it just keeps us running in circles and hurting ourselves further.
Exactly. Because the part of ourself, the thing that we're trying to amputate, like be it the critical voice or something, probably it has medicine in it and it has a message for us. And it also has a skill set that's amazing if we can just rechannel it into something else, you know?
So how did you work with that with dance? What has it been like over the years to open yourself up more to work with that voice?
Well, it continues to be a journey for me. I think that a big shift for me happened in college when I changed my major a couple times and really finally admitted to myself that I really wanted to major in dance. It was challenging for me to like reconcile with, I guess, the critical voice that was like, are you crazy? You can't major in dance. Are you good enough to do that? Where is that going? You know? But I had these incredible dance teachers in college that were really inspiring for me. And so that was kind of the beginning of that journey. And then it was in college that I applied for and received a grant called the Adventure Learning Grant through Fairhaven College. And that funded me for a year to pursue like a self-designed study project that wasn't a direct exchange with the university. And my proposal was to go to Brazil for a year and study just, different cultural representations of dance, like folkloric dance in Brazil, and also how we tell stories through dance cross-culturally. And at the time I was really interested in capoeira and Afro-Brazilian dance. And so that kind of initiated another phase in the journey of like understanding how to find ease in my body, because that whole immersive year in Brazil was this big wake up call for me about how powerful it is to see embodiment expressed more consistently in a different culture. Like I experienced that there was a lot less body shame, at least in the way that we experience it here, so yeah, witnessing that and being a part of it. And then it was around that time that I also met a group of really incredible hip hop dancers that were Brazilian, and they were self-training in a park by the beach, and they were young. I was 22 and they were probably between like 16 and 22 years old as well. And they just had so much like wild, uninhibited abandon. They were like so determined to just like take risks in front of each other, and specifically to freestyle and to like really, they learned a lot through freestyling and improvising. And it was kind of mind blowing to me because I had spent so much time studying dance in a studio, and the idea of like jumping into the center of a circle or a cipher while everyone was looking at me and just sort of like letting, like the instinct and the music and the spirit move my body, but also kind of exploring and understanding and learning through that improvised moment while being witnessed was just terrifying. And but then also turned out to be like extremely healing. Like it never got easy for me to do that, but it was really powerful to experience basically just being witnessed as you like try to figure something out versus needing to present it accurately, like as a finished product.
No, I totally hear you. I've been a singer my whole life and an actor, and that was always comfortable for me because I had lines. And I could be somebody else and I could totally throw myself into that. But when it came to public speaking or anything where I had to be myself in front of people, I couldn't think of anything scarier. Like I went skydiving and I went bungee jumping and I traveled all over the world for me to just like open my mouth and not know what was going to come out. And so where I'm getting with all of this is I did improv. Just like acting improv and games, and not knowing what's going to come out of your mouth in front of people. But again, like people that do that you're so held so safely in those spaces because everybody is willing to be vulnerable in front of everybody, and there's no wrong way to do anything, and it's so healing.
And I think that there's something really transformational about the energy that happens and that coalesces when people are all witnessing each other in that space. I think there's something that we get out of that that's very unique and can't be transmitted always in the same way in a classroom,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Or in a performance when it's all like refined. And there's other things and gifts that we get out of the classroom and the performance, but I think there's a very valuable kind of group collective energy that helps us make discoveries in a particular way.
Yes, absolutely. So you were in Brazil and you were exploring these new sides of yourself, and were you working on a project already at this point?
I wasn't. I was definitely seeking out what that project would be, because part of the agreement of the grant was to come back and do kind of like a senior thesis and find a way to tie it into something that I could contribute, to the community and the college when I returned. But initially, it was just about pursuing dance, like studying and also volunteering. So I was volunteering and teaching English and dance classes at a community center. Um, and then it was that group of dancers that first really, grabbed my attention at the park, that eventually led to a much bigger project. I spent about 6 months just dancing with them and kind of training with them and around them. And I mean, I was pretty shy and timid about it, but they were really, really welcoming. Um, and I just loved being around their energy, and our, friendships were developing and growing. And then as my language skills were getting better, because I learned Portuguese that year just through immersion. So it was a slow, tedious process of really being able to understand my new friends. But as my language skills got better, I was feeling really inspired by not just the power and wisdom of like their community and their dancing, but the power and wisdom of their perspective and their words. And I had always, just loved storytelling in all of its forms. And it had been very appealing to me for a long time to, to like study and pursue, documentary film work and filmmaking in general. And so it struck me that a cool way to make use of my time there would be to, to purchase a camera and to start documenting what I was witnessing in them, and what was, kind of explore it through the lens of a camera. And so that was kind of the beginning of what initially was just a senior thesis project. And I came home with that footage and, worked with the film teacher at my school and, learned like very basics of editing and made an extremely amateur version of a short documentary that kind of, documented like parts of that year and of their dreams and their goals and kind of their community spirit. And then it planted a seed in me that, continued to grow, of just really loving that format of, I think there was a way in which it kind of fused the writer and the dancer in me, because it was like storytelling with moving images and words. And yeah. And so that as time went by over the next couple of years, I noticed that same community of dancers, they were evolving, and they were like, new doors were opening for them. And through kind of the bolstering of their like really strong, self-made community of friends, they were like discovering how to become, little by little professional artists against, pretty substantial odds in terms of a lot of the resources and infrastructure that they didn't necessarily have. And that was really inspiring to me. And that's when it dawned on me that I was like, oh, I really want to understand this craft, and I want to keep studying it. And I also want to keep returning and collecting footage and kind of following the thread of this story to see if it turns into a feature-length documentary,
Which it did, yeah?
Yeah, it did.
So how many times did you go back over the years? What surprised you? What was all of that like?
Well, I went back after that first year of living there for a full year. I went back, five other times for various lengths of time, the shortest being 2 weeks, but mostly it was between like 3 months, or it was, between like a month and 3 months that I would stay when I would go back. And, oh man, I mean, I think that definitely on just a kind of a technical and artistic level, it blew my mind how extremely challenging it is to make an independent film.
I bet.
And and just how to make a film in general, the resources and the support that it takes, and also the community that it takes of professionals and artists. It's such a team effort. And I feel, I feel some gratitude for like the naive, idealistic me that was like 22 and 23 and 24 and 25 that didn't quite understand how challenging it was. Because I think if I had, I may have felt preemptively defeated, you know? So I kind of like pay homage to my idealistic self that was very passionate and moved forward regardless. And then I also, you know, sheepishly like laugh at myself a little bit when I think about just like, yeah, just how bold I was about it and how extremely impatient I was as well. Like I now having perspective, I'm like, oh man, of course it would take that long, not just in terms of resources and everything that you're trying to pull together, but you're also like letting a story evolve over time. You know, if you want to make a documentary really that is about a passing of time in people's lives and their evolution, and not all documentaries are like that, but this one was definitely, you know, a documentary about coming of age, and it required time to go by. And so I would have loved to definitely go back to my younger self now and just be like, hey, be less anxious about this because there's really like no need to rush, you know?
And it's so interesting. I feel like it speaks to like at a certain age, late teens, early 20s, there's so much you don't know. And so you just go out and do stuff and you have all of these ideals. And as we get older, we're expected to know, or we feel like,
yeah.
or there are a lot more things that we do know. And then we get to this point where it feels unsafe to not know. And I think what we want back from those early years is just the safety in not knowing.
That's beautiful. Absolutely.
Yeah. Which I feel like is something that can be brought back.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have the same sort of like complete not knowing, but it's an intentional not knowing and a safety in that, I think.
Totally. And I think a reverence for that not knowing and for the unknown, like lately I've been discovering a sense of reverence about all the things that continue to surprise me in life and all the ways that I gather wisdom, but then I still don't necessarily know the truth about something, or I don't know how this particular person in my life might deal with it, or this, you know, amazing possibility that hadn't been presented to me until, you know, so and so like shared their wisdom with me. So I feel so much reverence for all the things that I really don't know if it'll go this way or not, or if this is the best solution or not. And it's different. It's not like a lack of confidence in my ability to like discern what, you know, what good solutions to problems are, but it's just a sense of awe about like, wow, you know, this is what feels right, but I don't know. I'm not actually sure if this is the best. There's probably a lot of other options too, you know?
It's like there's always a lot of options, and there's always that sense of like, this feels right, or this doesn't quite line up. And I was thinking back, you mentioned, I think it was with your choosing a major or something with dance, where you're like, if I listened to that little pull in the beginning, I probably would have done this thing in the first place. I feel like that pull has become something you've become better at listening to.
Definitely. Yeah. I feel like every moment of my life is like, you know, and I'm sure this is true for a lot of people, a constant refining of my ability to really understand how that pull manifests and what it feels like in my life when I'm aligned with it and what it feels like when I'm not aligned with it. And definitely like it becomes clearer and clearer to me, like, oh, this way I'm feeling right now, that's what I feel when I'm not aligned with the pull. Like, okay, you know? And generally, if I were to put it in like really, really basic, simple terms, and of course it's more complex than this, when I am like feeling ease, I'm in alignment with the pull. Even if challenges are inherent, there's a sense of ease somewhere in my body. And when I'm not feeling ease, I'm usually not aligned with the pull, you know?
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. And I'm so glad that you said it that way. And you set it up as we can be very scared to go into trial and error. Like when I'm teaching intuitive eating, or I'm trying to get somebody to just like loosen up and listen to your body, people are very afraid of not having that plan and that set of rules. That, this is right and this is wrong, because then they have to begin to trust themselves. And they think that like, you know, I trusted myself and I ate the donut and then I felt terrible. So clearly I can trust myself. And it's no, that was just like the first step. And there are so many more steps, and it's so exciting.
Absolutely. And and I think like, and then it's beautiful because in trusting yourself in that process and like with the example that you gave, then you also have the opportunity to develop a tremendous tenderness and forgiveness of yourself, which I think is something we also become afraid to nurture, because it's like, okay, so then like I ate this donut and I didn't feel good. And so that was like part of my learning, and I'm okay. And I can be really tender with myself about it. And that's such a gift, because it's all about kind of crumbling this paradigm that, you know, the whole world is pretty shackled with, which is like the paradigm of the sinner, you know, which is like, oh, if you mess up, like you're out of the human family, like too bad. And I think we all kind of like live with that unconsciously shadowing our lives and the first place to transform it is internally, to like remind ourselves again and again with like every step we take and everything we do that, you know, nothing will exclude us from love. Like we can like offer that to ourselves over and over again, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And with that said, the whole sinner mentality and things being right or wrong, or us being right or wrong, even the word forgiveness, I think needs a little like a different perspective. My teacher in
Absolutely.
my recent yoga class that I finished, Guru Singh, he says forgiveness is just to give yourself forward. Just like thing, just you move forward. That's it. And then you take the next
Oh, that's beautiful.
yeah, it wasn't one that felt good. And so you move forward. That's it. Like endless compassion, not because you were wrong, like not because, you know, you're bad or you're sinful or you were lacking willpower or you don't know how to trust yourself. Like none of it. You're just like, oh, that wasn't like, that's not quite what I wanted. Okay.
It's like a letting go. Yeah.
Yeah. A constant letting go.
Oh, that's beautiful.
When you brought in the camera to people for the first time, was there still, because you mentioned there that there was less body image stuff, people were a little more uninhibited. When you brought in the camera, did you find that shift, or were the people that you were shooting just like totally cool, didn't even notice?
Oh yeah, quite the opposite. They were like, I think that I think a couple things were happening. One is, I think on some kind of like wider spiritual level, we were all kind of tapping into the like to the resonance of that we were all about to embark on a big journey together. Like I think all of us kind of knew that like, oh, this is going to start this big journey for us all together, you know, of witnessing and being witnessed. So I think that was there, and that created this natural kind of like excitement and just like presence in the group. And also, but also that particular group of people, partly what was so inspiring to me about them is that they were so comfortable, like, you know, being witnessed by each other, that the camera was just an extension of that, especially because it was attached to me, and we'd started to develop like a bond and trust, you know? So yeah, it definitely, if anything, what it shifted, I think, was that it just added this new dimension to the value of their journey. Like, and I think that's what can be so beautiful about documentary work, is that the documentarian comes in and there's this beautiful way in which it can, kind of call out or highlight just the inherent value of anybody's journey, you know, and that can be really powerful for both the person that's taking the journey and the person watching the journey.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it for the people that were like the actual journey that people go through on a documentary process, and like having that witnessed. Wow, that's beautiful. So why do you think there is less? I mean, do you think this is just outside of America? People aren't getting the same messages about body and shame, or was it Brazil in particular?
It's a good question, and it's complex. And I would definitely say that I can only speak from like my personal experience and my own kind of like feelings and instincts about it, because, you know, cultural paradigms and even anthropological paradigms are like so rich and so complicated. But definitely like what I experienced and witnessed was that, you know, it's all, the way that I frame it, I guess, for myself, is that it's like just like every human carries a different wound. I think every community carries a different wound or wounds, and cultures carry different wounds that we're trying to work through, like for the planet and for each other. And I experienced Brazilian culture as having other wounds that they were trying to work through, but it was not, but that not being one of them, like a comfort in the body, a celebration of the body, a celebration in general, whereas like celebration is very much manifest through community connection, inclusion, and dance and music. And because that's true, you know, how people are being raised and how communities celebrate in Brazil. You know, when I was there, and in a lot of the places that I went there, I was primarily in Rio, but I explored other places as well in Brazil. You know, people celebrate like intergenerationally often, and from a very young age, like everybody's dancing at the party. Like when music comes on, at like the family gathering or the party or the street party that just kind of randomly happened, you know, out of nowhere spontaneously. Everybody's dancing, like grandma's dancing, dad's dancing, my 3-year-old cousin is dancing. So it's this kind of like open invitation for everybody. And it's not about embarrassment, and it's not something that you do just because you are drinking or you're at a wedding, you know? And so because that is so much more inherent in that culture, it affects like all of the infrastructures that are created around how people are raised. And that completely changes your mindset around body image, especially when, you know, that dancing includes the whole body. So like, you know, the articulation of our hips and our ribs and like things that we consider very sexual in the United States are just a part of movement there. And that's not to say that they are lacking that connection to sexuality and sensuality too, because it's that as well. But it's also just movement, and it's just not as taboo, you know? And so I think it's really powerful to witness like the different like wounds and the different strengths that we have cross culturally, and how that is basically ingrained and upheld through how we like raise our children and how we connect with each other.
Wow. I was just thinking when you were talking about celebration of the body and the ease with which they celebrate with their body, celebrate in their body, celebrate the body itself, and how in America, like I'm always telling the women I work with, like it's okay to celebrate yourself. It's okay to say like, hey, good job. It's okay to look in the mirror and be like, I look pretty good today. Like these little things are so hard for them. And then I was thinking like, well, the body is very celebrated in this overtly sexual way, but then there's this underlying shame piece. And how beautiful is it to have this culture that you got to witness, that there's like an innocence around it, this innocent sexuality. I just think that's so lovely. Were you able to, do you feel like that you personally brought some of that home with you? Did you feel like you inhabited your body differently when you came back?
Definitely. Yeah. I think that absolutely. I felt very changed in many ways in my body. I felt like it helped me kind of cut away some of the like top layers of bullshit that I like carried in my body. Yeah, I felt more like in touch with kind of the whole, with like, with my whole body, just with like all the pieces. And simultaneously I felt more aware, and have ever since then, of all the ways in which I still inhibit myself. So it's almost like it helped me free myself, and yet it also heightened my awareness of all of the things that I'm trying to work through in my body. And so I'm really aware. It's very acute to me, like when I experience it, you know, just in my surroundings here and in my communities here. And it's also something that I just continue to track in my own body. And I think it helped really initiate a big journey for me around like shame and sexuality, and trying to, you know, find healing there.
You just put a word on something that I have not been able to put a word to. And I'm going to use this now because it makes so much sense. It's an initiation. That moment, like that experience wasn't well, now I'm free in my body and now I'm the end. Like I was the before and now I'm the after and I'm done. But you're forever changed after that initiation. Once you realize like, oh, I've got all these layers of bullshit that I need to work through. And then you realize that's okay. Then you're on the journey. And that's how I feel like, because I talk a lot on the internet about food, and like before I was really struggling and I was binge eating and I hated my body, and now look, I'm free and I do this and I do that. But I always try and weave in there like, hey, food is still a teacher. My body's still a teacher. I'm still on this journey. And initiation, yes, that's the moment that like was the turning point of, now I sort of feel like I've actually shifted something. There's freedom here.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, what it can be so beautiful. It can be a beautiful perspective to bring to the power of epiphany moments, because I often have found that if I have like a big, you know, epiphany moment or a big revelation, and then I'm like, I feel this, I see this, I understand this. And I'm like touching that, you know, that core of truth. And then I return from that and I can get really hard on myself when I'm like, I had that big epiphany and look at me, I messed up again, or I don't remember it right now. And what's been beautiful to me lately is the realization that like, but that epiphany was an initiation. It wasn't now done and done. I'm going to forever understand this. It was like a beautiful door opening. And so now I'm in the initiation, and my work is to to know that that epiphany lives in my cells and I'm finding out how to integrate and thread it through every experience. And so I'm going to naturally be given a lot of opportunities to like use it, which means that those opportunities might feel like pushback, but what they are is like, oh, look, here's a place where that epiphany like isn't in action. So like, great, you know, how can you thread them together?
Oh, that's so exquisitely liberating, because I think even in the like growth community, the personal development, spiritual community, even it can be like, well, you know, the universe is testing me, or
Yeah.
I figured it out and I'm just not like, I'm not putting enough of myself into this. And it's like, it's not, not that serious. Like it is, you take the journey with commitment and intention, but it's not like, oh my, like you're being tested, like you're getting a grade.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. Just opportunities. The layers of bullshit on top of the body inhibition. What were those for you? What are some of the layers that you've worked through, and how did you do it?
Gosh. Well, some of them were around, let's see, there's definitely a layer of bullshit around with movement, around the idea that if I express myself through movement, it has to be visually pleasing to someone else. Like it's for someone else, basically. Like it needs to please, or to be a presentation, or to be like, you know, clean and like, I don't know another adjective for it, but yeah, it just needs to be like well presented. And the truth below that bullshit for me was like, no, like when I express through movement, you know, it's like, it's medicine for me. And it's me like figuring something out through my body, and it's me following an exploratory process of pleasure and pain in the body, you know? And then if I'm in the framework of like, you know, choreographing or performing, then eventually, yeah, it does get to a space where I am presenting it. And so certain things become refined. But even in that presentation, like what has to pulse beneath is the authentic truth of like what I discovered in that movement process. And so, you know, we're working through that is kind of ongoing for me. It's sort of like takes a lot of, just bringing my attention again and again to noticing like, ooh, did I just restrict my movement, you know, either on my own when I'm, you know, playing and dancing, or like out in public? Did I just restrict my movement because I felt like that wasn't going to be pleasing to somebody to watch? I just try to like bring that witness in a lot, where I'm like, ooh, you know, and then sometimes it's not even a mental thought, as it's a physical sensation. Like my stomach will tighten or my ribs will contract. And I'm like, ooh, I'm inhibiting my body right now. And then I'll try to, you know, sometimes if I can't access release at that moment, then I'll try to go deeper into the feeling of restriction, which can be really helpful. So I'll like follow it, you know? So the idea is not to freeze. So if what you're feeling is release or restriction, don't freeze anywhere, just go into it. So if I'm feeling the need to like, ooh, like kind of curve into myself right now because I sort of want to hide, then I'm going to like move and find movement there and see like what that feels and looks like. And eventually it gives me information, you know, through my body.
Absolutely. Do you feel like as a dancer, because I didn't for the longest time have any awareness of my body whatsoever, and learning those subtle cues of like, oh, my stomach tightened up, or oh, I'm hunching my back now, it was really, really like a revelation to me that my body reacts in these ways. Do you feel like as a dancer you were sort of naturally set up for that, or do you feel like dancers can be very like, I really have no idea, but can you go through a class and be essentially disembodied and just learn the moves, or does it get you into your body naturally?
I think it can honestly be both ends of the spectrum. Like I totally know dancers who are just so embodied through their dance, like in class, outside of class. And I know dancers who very much compartmentalize, you know, and I think that, I mean, I think it's hard to take a lot of dance classes and to not start to like, you know, heighten your awareness of your body in some way. But I also think that there's a lot of ways in which people take classes, even like, you know, I see like kids that are taking like a ton of studio classes, and it's highly competitive, and they're at those studios where they're competition studios, and those aren't inherently bad. But sometimes I think what that creates in a really fast paced world where kids are like over scheduled is like a way in which, like they go into class and they're sort of like doing the moves and doing what they're supposed to do, but it's not necessarily going to a deeper level of like connection with their body and their body signals. And then of course it turns off when they're outside of that, because, now they have 10 other things to do, and that class is for the competition anyway. And I think it depends very much how it's framed, and absolutely could be connected or disconnected.
And I think it's really interesting that you said that dance will probably always give you some sort of body awareness, but I feel like this is one piece of a bigger whole. Like we can be totally aware that maybe this thought hurts us and this thought doesn't, but we choose the thought that hurts us maybe because it feels safer. There's no, like, just because we're aware of it doesn't mean we're not judging ourselves. You're aware of what your body's doing. Like when it hunches up, maybe you think that's the right thing to do. And maybe it's the awareness plus the softening and the removal of judgment around it. And even like you were saying, like following the pain and the pleasure. Like it's a very whole thing. And I know that you've talked about that with, you talk about shameless joy and how that doesn't mean that we're just like little joy bubbles all the time. But like everything is held when you're following joy, and you follow the pain and you follow the suffering, but you don't fight and resist any of it. Would you talk more about that? I'm rambling a little.
I've been really fascinated by the concept of shamelessness in general, and also of joy, and the idea that, I notice in my own life that a lot of times I hold myself back from joy for a few reasons. And one of them is worthiness. Like I hold myself back from joy because I'm like, I'm not worthy to feel joy when there's so much suffering in the world. Like that's not okay. It's not acceptable. Ironically, I think that, the more joy that we can generate and feel, I think the more benefit we can be to the planet. I think it creates more space in our body and mind for action and solution. I also think it feeds like a well energetically that's like really, really dried up and necessary for humanity. And I think another reason that I hold back from joy is the idea that like, well, if I'm allowing myself to be fully joyful, then it means that I'm ignoring the pain and I'm being false, and then it dawned on me this image of like joy is bigger than that, is this sort of like experience of, and basically it's an experience that lives inside love. And like love is this huge container that holds pain, pleasure, joy, suffering. And so if I allow myself to really, really like feel full joy in my body when I feel joy, or to really invite in like experiences that make me feel joyful and really allow, joy that's also reasonless, like to just move through my body, then I'm also like opening myself up to like all other experiences too. But that's the beauty of, the emotional body, is that everything moves and everything passes unless we grip onto it. So, joy will also move and pass, and then I might feel pain and that'll move and pass. But around all of that is like the container of love, and I think that that's the thing that doesn't ultimately change. I mean, it can change in our internal experience of it. Like I'm feeling loving or not loving right now. But I think that there's like a wider, I guess that's my personal connection to like spirit and source, is that there's a wider orb, and that orb is love, and it's beyond me and it's beyond our humanness. And it's the entity of love, and love loves everyone and everything all the time. And then within that, we're having these experiences of, joy and pain and pleasure and truth and doubt and sorrow and revelation.
Yeah. And it was the way you were saying, like, I hold myself back from joy, was as if joy is pulling you towards it. And I'm going to try and make words out of my experience. You're much more gifted at this than I am, but I feel like joy is always there, or maybe that's what you were saying when you said love is always there. And I feel like we're always being pulled towards it, and on the way there are other things. Other things come up. And so for me, sort of resting into the idea of like, okay, this, like, joy is my natural state, love is my natural state. So whatever I'm feeling is meant to be here, and it's on the way to joy. and these continue to
That's
come up. And if I
beautiful.
don't fight them, like joy comes. And
Oh,
that's been a big experiment, and it's turning out beautifully.
oh yeah.
And I think
That's
it's also
lovely.
it's a hard one to trust. It's a hard one to
Mm-hmm.
trust. And so I think that's maybe where you go into experiment again. Like, can I trial and error with this? Can I try
Mm,
this idea? Can I be willing to go into suffering without it meaning that I'm a negative person
mm,
or not a spiritual person or not doing things right? Because I think that's what we tend to think too, is if I'm sad or if I'm suffering or if I'm whatever, I'm not doing it right. So that we should be
exactly.
joyful all the time if joy is our natural state, and that's not true either.
That's why that's such a beautiful, I love that frame that you just said is it's on the way. These are all things like on the way to
Mhm.
joy. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
Would you We talked in the beginning about your poem, because I'm thinking now about wholeness and just like love encompassing everything and how we really need to allow for everything. And your poem From Soul to Ego spoke to me so deeply because I have such a and I just went through this yoga teacher training too, and people are very very anti-ego, and just like it hits me in
Mm.
the heart all the time. And I don't want to argue with people, and I try and gently sort of share my perspective. Like, I don't think that this is, like, from what I can tell within my own experience, this is not a part of me that is bad. This is
Mm.
a part of me that's so on my side, and so it may have a limited perspective. It may be wounded. It may not see the big picture, but there's maturing and growth even within the ego part of me when I allow it. And like you were saying earlier, like
Mhm.
the pain or the discomfort, like there's always a message in it, a lesson in it, a tool in it, something in it that we can't get rid of anything. So
Mm,
nobody's getting rid of the
mhm.
ego. And I would, so I'd love for you to read your poem,
Sure.
get your perspective on it.
Okay. My soul asked my ego out on a date. Believe me, no one was expecting it. They are like fire and water, some whispered. Well, opposites do attract, others argued. I just stood back and watched it all unfold. I never knew my soul could be such a charming romantic. I never knew my ego could be such a tender sweetheart. When my ego answered the door at 7 p.m. sharp, my soul was holding two purple flowers. Dashing move, I know. And this is what she said: I have something to give you, but first you need to stop running in circles, look me in the eyes, and breathe. I want to pollinate your deepest potential, but first you need to be here, right now, even though the world feels impossibly heavy with heartache. This first flower is for your most vulnerable disposition. I am here to court your terror. I will shower your panic with loving attention. I will look inside the machinery of your making and learn all the circuits, spot the crossed wires and frayed edges and broken parts that never got replaced. I'll note the pristine strength and grit that helps you identify yourself in this wild human world. All the fiery proclamation, the intelligent discernment, and the sexy, powerful pride. Because, my dear, I notice everything. I will not try to repair. I will nod my head and widen my eyes. I will soften my voice and make my body into a shape like reverence. I will learn you, the tiny you, the wounded you. I will love you for exactly where you are in this moment. And when I've memorized your pain, I will let it go, all of it, like a flurry of dandelion wishes caught by the perfect wind. My ego's jaw was on the floor, you can imagine, right? When she finally pulled herself together, she asked my soul about the second flower. My soul held it out and grinned. This flower is for you to give to me, she said. My ego blushed, embarrassed that she hadn't come prepared. My soul wiped the blush off my ego's cheeks with one curving, shameless finger. Court me, and life becomes less terror and more curiosity, she cooed. Fall in love with me every day, and the world becomes less angering and more humbling, she chanted. Honor me, and the universe introduces you to cooperative crowds of passion who gather in spaces free of scarcity, who support one another to do the brave work of waking up. I don't know if they stayed there at the door or walked into the night. I don't know if they kissed right then or waited till goodbye. I lost track of two versus one, of this or that, of then and now. The divided dissolved, sudden as a birth cry, and it all turned purple petals, tracing dances down my face.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
Have you ever, just out of curiosity, do you ever record your poetry?
Gosh, I went through a phase in my writing in my early 20s where I was doing spoken word for a while, and which I really enjoyed. And I performed a couple times and maybe recorded myself once or twice, but I don't get into the habit of doing it now. And reading that out loud reminded me how helpful it is sometimes to put your voice to it. So thank you for asking me to do that. It was useful.
Yeah, I mean, it would be amazing if it was just available for people to hear, because you have like, it's in your voice, obviously, like it's all a part of you, and when your voice puts it out there, it's just, I feel like it's almost twice as powerful. That was lovely. I'm just gonna leave that at that because that was so perfect. To tie things up, the name of the podcast is Free Spirit Academy, and I always ask this question at the end. For me, how I define a free spirit is nothing more than when you just get to be yourself, like the purest essence of who you are, however much of that you've discovered at any point in your life. So me, when I get to be me, you, when you get to be you. When you think of a free spirit, how do you define it for yourself?
When I think of a free spirit, I think of a human who is able to be simultaneously deeply human and also deeply everything outside of their humanness.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Randy. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
This was absolutely beautiful. If people want to follow your work, where we'll put all of the links below, but where are the best places to find you?
Sure. So my feature-length documentary, which is officially complete and should be released soon, is called Believe the Beat. Amazing. And people can go to believethebeat.com, which will be updated soon with release dates and screenings. They can also go to urbanbodyproject.com, which is my own kind of production dance for camera collective. And then my writing work can be found on JocelynEdelstein.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. Before I wrap things up, I want to invite you to come join the private Free Spirit Academy Facebook group, where I post videos, offer support, and answer questions on all things food and body freedom. And you'll also get a free copy of my ebook, The Eat to Feel Good Diet. I hope to see you there.